Hello, everyone. This is Terry Mitchell with the Voice on Fire interview series, Interviews with Intention. So for those of you who may not have followed along before, I love to interview people that I consider to be change agents. They're difference makers, they're action takers, they're people who want to make a difference somewhere in their local community or even perhaps across our global village. My guest today certainly fits into that criteria. I'd like to welcome Lauren Schuivens to the Voice on Fire platform. Lovely to see you today, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Excellent.
Let's kick this off.
Absolutely. So what I'd love to do is introduce you by way of what it is you do. So that'll be the first question off the top of the list. And I'd love to share with the audience what it is that you do today and let us have that conversation.
I love it. Let's go right to the chase. I am building a global meditation franchise. That's what I do.
Okay.
And I'm a certified meditation and mindfulness trainer. I've been trained by Buddhist monks in Thailand, so actually went back to the core of where this whole practice comes from.
Oh, wow.
And what I'm doing right now is bringing it back to what we call the Western world, so to say, to really spread the ancient practice of meditation, the actual traditional practice of meditation with those around me, and then further in the world. Our brand, our organization is called Samavira. Those are two Sanskrit words. Sama means peace of mind, perfect, meditation, peace of mind. However, Vira means courageous, because we believe that it may take courage to actually look into your shadow sides, to actually look into what comes up when you meditate, because it's not always just joy and fun and peace of mind. That's what comes after, right?
Yeah.
But first you may need courage to actually look into yourself and see what's actually happening there. So that's what we do. We host in-person group trainings, group meditation trainings, where people actually come back together in real life, right? Not like the COVID versions online, but real life, real community, real people. Because group energy actually helps you bring you deeper into the meditation practice, which is beautiful. Wow. And our students actually want to come back in the groups, in the studio, and do this together.
Wow.
And we host these group trainings where people actually learn how to meditate and what happens when they meditate and how to create a meditation style that fits them. So there's no one size fits all like there is sometimes online. Also, we actually train people on how to meditate versus just receiving a guided session, right? Versus just going through a guidance or through an app and kind of staying dependent on that because they have to come back to the app to do the next session or come back to the guide to follow the next guided session. So we actually train people to be self-sufficient, to be independent meditators, which is, we are the first mover in this space. Believe it or not, this didn't exist yet when we got the idea and when we started working on this, which was mind-blowing to me. So I thought, okay, no time to waste. I need to jump on this train. Because, so basically to understand it in more simpler terms, perhaps, we are creating a similar organization, the way Zumba, the fitness, the workout dance brand, the way they created their organization, and we envision to become as big or perhaps even bigger than they are, but in the meditation space.
Fantastic.
The meditation and mindfulness space.
That's quite an accomplishment in itself, but also just even to see that there is that cliche is the gap in the market, but to see that and to recognize there is an opportunity to take something that is really so beneficial into a wider space so that people don't miss out on that opportunity. And on capturing something that you mentioned there, it's something to go to a guided meditation or to listen to a guided meditation, say audio or video on YouTube, for example, but it's another thing altogether to, in fact, learn how to properly meditate. And I've only ever myself had one session at a particular retreat that I went to, and it was completely different to anything that I had experienced. So in what ways do you find it's different in guiding people through a meditation, as in, you know, the standard process that many would be used to, versus actually teaching them or showing them or training them how to meditate? What do you know is different in terms of, if the audience listening to this wanted to understand, how would you explain that?
I love that question. Thank you for asking it. I think the main answer here would be that when we think of meditation, what we kind of think of is to try and calm down the mind, to kind of like settle it, empty it, kind of like push it aside a little bit for a while so we can have a peaceful meditation, right? But I believe when you first experience with your body, with your system, and go through an initial guidance of the meditation, because we do start our trainings with the actual experience. But if you later on integrate the mind through understanding of what it is that we do, how to do it, how to adjust depending on the state of the day or the phase of your life that you're in, because meditation can be different today, tomorrow, of course. When you actually integrate the mind into the practice, there's wholeness, it's more holistic, and we actually invite the mind to be a friend of ours instead of an enemy, as it's quite often seen these days, because the mind is chattering, the monkey mind we've heard of. It's like we kind of have to tame it. That's the connotation we have these days of the mind. But in our trainings, we actually incorporate it. First we experience, then we understand. Those together is highly, highly powerful. And students, we have had students who've been meditating 10, 15 years before coming to our trainings. So the first few trainings that I gave back in the day, of course, I was a bit nervous because I thought, wow, okay, let's see if this can still provide something for them. But their feedback was, wow, how come I never came across this before? How come this doesn't exist? And that they really felt that they dropped in so much deeper. They really connected with themselves instead of just with a voice that's speaking to them all the time, basically, to keep you in your mind to an extent, because you're constantly listening to something external instead of checking inside. And they were so convinced that I thought, okay, this is really something. We need to spread this bigger and wider and further and faster.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit on something exactly there, just from my own personal experience. There is that sense that when you are first learning to meditate, as in going into a meditation just to calm the monkey mind, it is, you more or less are listening to somebody external to yourself guiding you, and it does act as a distraction to what's going on in your head, because you are listening, and it's an action, and it's something to give your brain something to do as a way to kind of not let it keep doing what it's doing, which is chattering and going on and, you know, throwing 100 thoughts at you. Whereas when you're actually meditating and learning to connect with your body, it just becomes a process of letting your body speak to you. And in a strange way, the experience I've had is that your mind stops chattering because you become more interested in what your body's actually doing, as opposed to any words out there or any sound out there. And you can hear a sound out there and it becomes insignificant. It doesn't matter that there might be a train going past or a person, you know, talking out the front of the house, or a dog barking, or whatever it might be. You can just simply become more comfortable feeling whatever is feeling inside the body, even from the tip of the toes to the top of the head. I don't know if that would be a kind of my interpretation. Would that be more kind of my humble way of explaining it?
You're right on point. I couldn't have said it better, honestly. Yes, totally. Exactly. And the internal messages that are coming up are indeed so much more interesting than any messages of our own minds or the messages of the people, the noises around us. Exactly on point.
Fantastic. Thanks. No, it's lovely to hear that there is an experience that can be had. But I kind of wanted to segue with this, because even though it sounds like it's, you know, that sounds really lovely to be able to connect with your body, you've mentioned that sometimes it's not necessarily always the joy and the loveliness. Sometimes it can come up with some less pleasant things that are actually still hoarded away by the body, who likes to stick things away in dark corners until you're ready to deal with them. Tell me a little bit more about how that experience plays out for you.
Definitely. And thanks for asking this, because this is important to talk about. And I feel not many people do talk about it. First of all, many meditation guides are not always certified. And second, we use meditation for anything and nothing these days. Although when there's, for example, something like trauma going on, it's actually necessary to be a bit careful, which many people actually don't know.
Yes.
So we always pre-screen to see if there's any actual phase or condition going on that we need to be aware of. But let's say the average student, right? Let's take them first. We notice that especially when people start meditating, but also when people already have meditation experience and then are able to drop in deeper, as we like to call it, right? Because it literally it's a great anecdote, a great visual representation of what happens when you actually meditate the traditional way, basically. So sometimes you may come across something that you had forgotten about yourself, or a part that seems a bit contradictory within yourself. That's quite common actually, because everything is yin and yang. But we are being so, I'm not saying it's a negative thing, not at all, but it's an unbalanced thing. It's an incomplete thing, I would say, that we are primed to focus on the positive, to be optimistic. That's kind of like the other extreme, not fully in balance anymore either. Focusing on the negative is not balanced. Only focusing on the positive is not balanced either, right?
Absolutely.
You need to have both. And meditation will show you both. Meditation, the easiest way to explain what meditation does is it will show you a mirror. It will actually place you in front of a mirror where you can see yourself, where you can see what's actually going on inside of you. And then you can decide more, proactively what you want to do with that. It's not just taking over, it's not just dictating you. You'll see it. You will be in a gentle way confronted with it. So you can take a more informed decision basically about what you want to do with it, if you want to try and adjust that a little bit about yourself, or if you want to integrate it in a different way so it doesn't contrast each other as much anymore. But sometimes as well, meditation can bring up past experiences that were in a sense traumatic, because we are hearing this more and more times these days. From the moment that we are born, we are going through a few traumatic experiences, and it doesn't have to be something as extreme as a violent robbery, rape, or anything like that. When I say trauma, I also mean the daily triggers sometimes that kind of shock our system, subconsciously or subconsciously. Those are also already labeled as traumas because they are a shock, literally. We have traumas in lesser extent and bigger extent. And what meditation can do is bring up some of those experiences again, bigger or smaller, depending on, and kind of show you again all the things that are happening in your system, all the particles of you, basically, so to say. And some of them you may like. You may actually realize you're so much more comfortable, flexible, and kind to yourself than you thought you were. Or you can see that, okay, the past few days I haven't actually been very nice to people, and just realize that because you are taking a moment, closing your eyes, sitting still, and letting what comes up come up. At first, instead of trying to shut down the mind, because the mind is part of that whole process, I believe, and that's how we see things differently than mainstream does these days. But yeah, things may come up that you may not like at first sight, and then the question is, okay, what do you want to do with it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really important for people to understand that the mind is like, we all know the cliche as well, that the mind is like a sponge. We absorb information at a fast rate, so fast that, when they've done scientific studies, they've been blown away by how quickly the brain can process pieces of information that the eyes haven't even registered. The information's come in milliseconds, and the brain hasn't even had a chance to think it through. So it hasn't gone into the thinking stage. It's just registered within the body, because it goes into that very subconscious level, goes in unconsciously, it goes to subconscious, and then it comes to the mind's awareness. But that can take a long time. And a lot of us are very good at blocking or not letting ourselves experience some of what goes on because we're uncomfortable. There may be a past trauma, or we may be just not educated about it. So the mind being like a sponge that it is, it's interesting to know that when you're talking about your the type of going deeper in that meditation, sometimes it is going to bring up something that really makes us feel very uncomfortable. So I appreciate that you're being very real about this, because meditation isn't all sunshine and roses. Sometimes it can be a little bit thorny and a little bit uncomfortable, but it also serves a good purpose because of that, because it does, as you say, kind of puts that mirror in front of you and allows you to proactively, as you say, choose which way you want to address it, I suppose. So we've talked a little bit about what you do in terms of the development of, not only, I understand that you're developing an app, is that correct?
Yes and no. An app will come later, but we actually want to go back to the real life space, as I mentioned. So currently we give in-person group trainings, and an app will be a supportive mechanism, but we're definitely not trying to compete with the bigger meditation apps out there. That's not the way we go. The way we go is actually bringing people together, guiding them through an 8-week training, where each week they also again dive a bit deeper into the practice, into the theory, into the experience, into the know-how. And that's how we train us to become independent meditators. And I can imagine, like, certainly in Australia, we've had a fairly strict range of COVID lockdown experiences across our different states.
And I can imagine being able to do something in a room with people must almost feel quite enlightening in itself.
Yes, exactly.
So you've mentioned that the trainings are actually in person, which sounds really wonderful. And in terms of what you do, who is it that you're doing this for? Is there a select audience or a select range of people that you focus on? How is that playing out for you?
Well, to state the obvious, of course, someone would need to be interested in meditation, because otherwise you can throw whatever you want on them, but it's not gonna be caught, basically. We do meditation beginners are very welcome, because we do start from the top, basically, when we guide people through the whole process. Also because we use a different meditation style than, for example, Zen or Vipassana. We are different than that. So we do start from the beginning anyways, whether someone is a beginner or advanced. Our main target audience, however, are people who have had some experience with meditation already. For example, they've been trying an app, they've been trying to meditate through YouTube by themselves on music, or guided sessions through a guide. That's something that they keep coming back to. And what we aim to do is to indeed move them away from the dependency of an app, of a guide, and really help them to drop in deeper. So especially people, like I mentioned, who have had some experience with meditation already, this is first of all a new meditation style to them, because it's not that known yet. It just came up 50, 60 years ago in Thailand. So it's actually quite a new style, quite a new version or brand, however you want to call it. But we kind of want to reintroduce them to the actual traditional form of meditation. Because I feel many modern meditations are, like I mentioned, either someone talking to you for 15 minutes. It's kind of like a storytelling exercise, which is also nice, don't get me wrong, but not fully the same as what we're trying to put out there. Or indeed, it's more of like a visualization exercise. You're asked to visualize this or that, or manifest this or that, which is also nice. I do those things as well, but I do them in addition to my actual meditation. They are not my meditations, because from my perspective and from our perspective, it's not the same. But I think these days, all these versions have been kind of clustered together, thrown on the pile together, and be like, this is meditation. We kind of want to separate them again and be like, okay, this is this, this is this, this is this. By all means, do combine them, because they strengthen each other, they enhance each other, yes. But if you say, okay, I want to learn how to meditate, then this is what actual meditation is, where it came from, how it used to be, and how we can kind of put it in a slight modern jacket, so you don't have to become a monk to actually go through the real experience. But, and hence is why I did go back to the monk, so I can bring back a version that does fit in the modern world, because we do live in a society right now where everything is fast-paced. We don't have time to sit down for 2 hours and close our eyes. I mean, don't even think about it, but really to bring back those two worlds again, because I feel we moved away too far.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's important that we understand that, the traditional style of meditation, depending on, the I suppose the source of information, is that they can go into a meditative state all day, literally from the moment they wake up through until the time they actually decide to go to sleep. If they actually don't spend all day, 24 hours is not an unheard of time just to be sitting in mindful meditation. That's fantastic, but as you say, modern day world, not quite so able to do so. So what is the way to maximize the benefit of doing such a valuable act of self-care, but doing it in a way that fits with today's society? So yeah, it sounds like a really awesome way to introduce people to something that really we do need to bring back into the world, and more so because I think, and it'd be interesting to hear your take on this, I think just the experience of COVID has really shattered some people's realities. It's challenged some people to really question themselves, and certainly in Australia, I've seen some fairly unpleasant reactions to the government's behaviour towards the virus and the vaccination process. So that kind of reaction has left people with feelings of a lot of different emotions that they probably have never felt before. So I think the timing at this stage certainly seems to me to be really quite ideal. And I'm just interested to know, with regards to what you're doing, is there any other message about it that you'd like to share before we go into the next question? 'Cause I've got a certainly like to take further into, perhaps going a little bit deeper in this.
Sounds great. I think my final message is indeed that the timing is totally right, both in terms of COVID, as well as in terms of more and more people who become interested in meditation, and how much more popular and known meditation becomes, because some of the most successful CEOs now started talking about their meditation practice, so people become inspired and motivated. This wasn't planned as such. It was something that, literally an idea that came up. I started doing some research to see which offers and which organizations and businesses and brands were out there, and none were. So I thought, wow, okay, everything coming together. Let's definitely take this forward now. Maybe one more thing to share about this, because I hadn't mentioned yet, is that the meditation style that we use, coming from Thailand, is called Dhammakaya. So Zen, Vipassana, they're quite known, right? A lot of people have heard of them, definitely Vipassana retreats. They're basically a franchise as well when you think about it, because there's Vipassana retreats happening worldwide. So we are using a similar kind of model, but with the Dhammakaya meditation style. And in Dhammakaya, it's said that the home of the mind is located in the center of the body, which is just above the navel. So that's also what we do in our practice. We go to that center of the body, just above the navel, kind of bring back the mind to where it comes from, because that's where those let's call them emotions or sensations, such as bliss, compassion, full understanding, are located, they say. And that's what I've experienced myself as well in my own training, and hence why I thought, oh my God, everyone needs to know about this, right? And let's not be selfish and keep this to myself. Let's definitely spread this with those around me. So
it's fascinating that you mentioned that, because one of the first thoughts that went through my mind was what I've always figured was a little bit of a sarcastic cliche about meditation, was the old staring at the navel, or that. And it's like, in truth, that's really where you do focus your attention. It's not staring at it, but it's that focus of attention. And they are now making the link between what they call the mind and the gut as being the two brains of the body, and the two active centers of the body that reveal all. So it's really not that different to discover that, oh gee, we have a gut issues, and often the time the issue is that there's something wrong within the gut and the gut health, and we're discovering all that and making big inroads on that and discovering how important that is. And really, meditation also, the traditional meditation really focuses on that central part of the body where all of that energy is. Do you think there's any irony in that?
To be very honest, you're the first person who mentions it, and you're so right. It hadn't crossed my mind, to be very honest, but it sounds like we made that discovery before. We kind of forgot about it, and now we're basically trying to bring it back. So thanks for adding that on, honestly. Really, and I'm going to use that as well, just so you know.
My pleasure. So to take this one step further, we've discussed in little detail the what it is that you do and who you do it for. Let's dig a little bit deeper into the why you do it. So there's perhaps, even if you wanted to go into a little bit of your story, just let people know why it is that you came up with this and where this all started.
Yeah, definitely. The most basic reason why I do this is definitely, okay, the world needs this, and now more than ever. That's kind of like, it became kind of a cliche sentence, so it's definitely not the main reason, the main cause, right? This originated definitely from my own story, and I think everyone who is really on a mission in this world went through something at some point in their life that moved them to do whatever it is that they're doing, to really continue healing themselves, and also in addition healing, serving, helping others. And this is such a pattern, really. It's kind of like something happens at first, it's really intense, it's really hard, difficult, challenging, but then we kind of climb out of it, and we think we feel more empowered, and we have that energy to spread this with others who are open to it, who want this, who need this, etc. So yeah, indeed, where to start? I think when I look back at my childhood, my adolescence, I was very happy, I was very lucky with my parents, but I went through a few experiences that they were very challenging to me before. For example, I lost my virginity through force. So it wasn't my choice to actually, lose my virginity. I was held at gunpoint when I was just 17. So that was like the literal flash of like life flashing by in front of your eyes. And I was already not doing well in life at that point. I was already going through quite a long-term depression of a few years, and having suicidal thoughts, thinking about what it would be to end my life because I didn't see another way out. But then that moment that they held that gun to my heart actually was a very cliche in a sense. My life flashed by and I thought, no, I'm actually not done yet, which was very in sharp contrast to how I was doing, because I was not doing well at all. I was kind of like trying to climb, like a crawl through the day, basically. I was actually, properly raped again later in life as well. So my self-value, my self-worth were like below zero at that point. I think I was, it was, I won't go into too much detail, but just to sketch the picture that I was not in a good place.
Yeah.
I definitely wasn't. And I went through many traditional therapies, like EMDR, which is trauma therapy. I went through psychotherapy. I went to a psychologist, even a psychiatrist. I was even on antidepressants, on medication for a while. All that did, however, was kind of bring me back to a baseline, which is what I'm definitely grateful for, because I was below baseline at that point. But it didn't help me get further. And so basically, you can see it as such. We're trying to survive in life. And I was surviving at that stage. I was doing better, but what else? I was waiting for that next phase, that next step, and it wasn't coming. And I was continuing with my therapies, and I was thinking, is this it? This cannot be it. I cannot believe that everyone else feels like I have zombie going through life, feeling like it's good enough, but it's definitely not great, and I want great, and So I was thinking about, okay, how can I go from this surviving feeling to a more thriving feeling, as they call it these days? And I started looking at some more alternative therapies in terms of people with whom, let's say coaches, let's say people with whom I could actually talk about more things than just the traditional psychologist who would run me through their booklet and say, okay, you're diagnosed with that. This is how we're going to treat it, really by the book, black and white. And I also came across meditation and mindfulness at that point. And I think I was in a good enough state, a stable enough state to actually use meditation and mindfulness. Because this is what I wanted to mention before, what briefly came up before. If your trauma is actually active at a certain stage, it's not a good idea to start with meditation, because you can become re-traumatized because of that mirror. If it's already too intense, then the mirror can be double intense, bringing you back to where you came from instead of forward to where you want to go. So that's something to be careful with. It's good to enter that baseline and then add it on top to move forward, to continue healing, basically. And that's what happened with me, precisely that. I started meditating online through YouTube. I came across this organization in Thailand. It's very, looking backwards, it's easy to connect the dots, thinking, wow, this was lined up, really. But when you look forward, you're thinking, okay, how's this going to help me? Let's just dive in and see what happens. So the first time I went to Thailand, I went through a 10-day meditation retreat. I thought, this is quite something, I really enjoyed it.
Wow.
And long story short, a few years later, I went back and actually became certified to train others in this. And out of that, I create the actual student training, basically, that we're now spreading with our own organization. So I'm incorporating what I learned from the monks, what I learned from the actual meditation style, my own life experience, science, so theory as well. And that is, long story short, where it came from. My own remedy, and feeling like the power of this, the space there is to actually help others, help spread this to others. Given that people do meditate, but not the way I believe meditation was intended to be used. So it really comes from deep inside. It really does come. It is indeed like a fire within me that's, burning, and I can't say no to it because it's too strong in a good way.
Absolutely.
Every day I'm continuing to work and to spread and to grow the community, and
it's wonderful. Thank you for sharing your story, and I just want for others to understand, as they're listening to this or perhaps watching the YouTube video about this, that if you are going through a trauma or anything is happening to you, don't hesitate to reach out to somebody. I'm available. You can always just look out for the details in the description below. there is always a way forward. And sometimes even in those darkest, most horrifying, traumatic times, it never feels like there is. And to share a little bit, to show my understanding of what you have shared, I mean, I had my own traumatic childhood and growing up in some of the most difficult circumstances and going through my own traumas. I had also, at the age of 13, was imagining the bridge that was about 50 meters down the road that was across the river, and just believing that was the time I was going to jump off the bridge, because I can't swim to save myself. So it would have been the end of me. And I often thought about the trucks that would travel the road out the front of our house. Living out in the country, there were always big trucks going past, and I thought, you know what, I could just go and jump out in front of them. But my heart was there saying, I wouldn't do that to the truck driver. How awful. What an awful thing to do to him or her. And I decided, well, I can't do that. And there were many times that I went through those, my life's not worth it. Why am I even doing this? But I was 13. So it's sad, and I look back and think, you know, that poor child that going through so many dark emotions at such a young age, at a time when my mind probably couldn't even really process what was actually going on. So it's really important, reach out, always talk to somebody that has a role to play in the healing process. So whether it be the doctor, the nurse, the psychologist, the psychiatrist, the social worker, the school counsellor, whoever that person is, entrust somebody with how you feel, because there is always hope. And then you can become the person, such as you, Lauren. You've been through darkness, you've seen those really awful emotions, and yet here you are doing something quite remarkable to start a movement to make a difference around the world. So that's part of the reason why I like doing these interviews, is because the story behind the movement, the story behind the foundation, the story behind is often what helps me to share with others that there is hope out there. And you may feel right at this moment in your life that you are in the worst possible state, but it can, as you say, it can be the impetus to actually get you into that place where you know there's more, there's got to be more. Yes. And you might just be that right person. So if you are listening, I hope you hear that message. And it's really important. Whether you find meditation, I certainly would recommend it, but also be sure that you are supported. And to come back to our conversation, Lauren, one of the things I was curious about is you mentioned that if someone is going through perhaps a traumatic situation, and you do screen any clients that come through, that perhaps it's not a good idea to go straight into any sort of deeper meditation, that maybe it's a good idea to address what's going on first. I wonder if it might be suggested also that perhaps start with just a little style of introductory meditation, like the YouTube channel stuff or the guided apps, whatever those simple ones might be, while also being supported, a little bit like your own story. You were supported, you did come out of that awful stage into a bit of a fog and into a baseline. And while you were being supported, you also then perhaps started to discover that there are other modalities out there. Would it be fair to say that it's okay if somebody wants to also, say, do something similar to what you did, be supported, but also then start to explore other options?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely when you feel you're heading towards that baseline, you can indeed start with, let's say, mindfulness practices, perhaps not yet the full deep meditation experience, because indeed that mirror can be triggering, which is something that can help you move forward, but you need to have a strong enough foundation to build that on, basically. But yes, definitely like soft meditation styles. Let's say breathing exercises, for example, mindfulness exercises, definitely. But I would still suggest to do it in addition to actual therapy, whatever that might be for you, because different things work for different people.
Absolutely.
But yes, you can definitely start introducing yourself and then building on that, so that eventually, and again, there's nothing special about me. If I can do it, I believe, and this sounds like a cliche, but I really, really, really believe this is true. Anyone can do it. However, we all need support. I ask for my support as well. You don't have to do it alone. So thank you so much, Terry, first of all, for also sharing your story and your part in this, and for also mentioning how important it is to actually call out, reach out, and share and ask for support, because it's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. That you can acknowledge what's going on. Exactly. Absolutely. And then say, okay, I need this, I need you, I've done that as well, and
Yeah,
couldn't be happier that I did, because some things, it takes a tribe to raise a child, right?
Absolutely.
That's what they say. And it also takes a tribe to sometimes get you back up to speed, basically. To life can be tough.
Oh, absolutely.
I am not that optimism guru that you see sometimes. I think I'm the reality guru. No, I'm not a guru at all, of course, but more like there's both sides, guys. There's yin and there's yang. How can you integrate the two? Because that makes you more powerful than focusing only on the lights, the happiness, the joy. Definitely, it's part, but it's not the only part. And if we don't acknowledge the other sides, the other experiences, the other, perhaps even trauma, indeed, we're still not fully complete. They're still not integrated, still not balanced, and still not enabling you to tap into the full power that you have. Because there is a fire. Just to link back to also the name of the podcast, Voice on the Fire, right? There is a fire in all of us, but sometimes the fire through experiences or whatnot can dim a little bit, can get a bit smaller, but it's still there. It doesn't go away. So it's all about finding the person, the therapy, the technique that helps you bring the light up that fire again, really. So I think it's perfectly aligned with
I think that's important, that we recognize that. Something that really stands out for me about what you just said is it's lovely if we can find that way to be really positive and upbeat and really joyful in the moment all the time. That would be wonderful. But I think, as you say, it's a little bit of an imbalance. It's not reflective of the true nature of existing as a human being in the everyday world. And doesn't mean that we also then have to sit in utter despair and be really quite miserable and down and negative and feel awful about everything. Even though we may feel that in the trauma and in the moment, it doesn't mean that there is no way out of that. And I don't believe in faking it till you make it, though it does play a part to trick the mind to say, we don't have to be in this dark space. It's possible that if we just practice smiling, we may feel a little bit better in ourselves. If we just practice being nice to the next person we see, even though we are feeling awful in ourselves, it may just help us to take ourselves out of the dark space just enough to get to that baseline, as you mentioned. I think the reality for us is that social media has a tendency to paint this notion that we must always be upbeat, and that, anybody who's not upbeat is negative or toxic. And I have a bit of a thing about that. I don't believe that people are toxic. There is toxicity, and there are select people that I would certainly classify as toxic, and I would say they are people that, unfortunately, I don't know that any level of meditation will ever help them, because they may in fact have something chemically wrong with their brain. And really there are studies that have shown that some people are unfortunately born with elements within their brain structure that make them, unfortunately, not very nice people. And I mean, I'm talking about the really evil people, the people that have got what it takes to hold a gun to somebody, as you've experienced. That kind of horrid behavior. Maybe there are some people that can, through meditation, have their brains healed, because it certainly can help. But in terms of real toxicity, I think we need to be a little bit careful about the use of the word toxic to describe people. We need to acknowledge that things can be negative, things can be difficult, things can be harsh. And we may be meeting somebody who is in that very dark space and not realize that before that dark time happened, they were really bright and bubbly and lovely, but they had a trauma that has taken them into a dark space and they don't know their way out. And I think we need to discover ways to actually really re-embrace with people and show them that it's okay. You don't have to be bright and bubbly around me. I take you as you are, but let's try and get you to that place where you do feel like you are bright and bubbly again. And I think meditation, as you've described it throughout this discussion, really is a tool, a method, a modality that would allow us to really find that again. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better again. And there's this quote that came to mind while I heard you speak, and it's that let's please all be nice to people we come across in our day, because you have no idea what's going on in theirs. You have no idea what's going on in their day, in their life, what they just went through. And this really motivates me also on those days where I still feel a bit lower, because I'm not perfect either, not yet. And quotes like this really help motivate me to stay mindful about what's going on within me, within them, within the world that we all engage in, we all are active in, right? But yeah, perfectly well said. Totally on point.
Yeah, excellent. So in terms of if people wanted to find you online, whereabouts would they look for you, and what links would you like them just to be sort of directed towards? Because bear in mind, for everybody that's listening or watching, that in the description below the video and the podcast, there will be all the links where you can actually find where Lauren is located. So just share one or two where you'd like them to look.
Yes, our organization is called Samavira, as I said. So we are under samavirameditation.com. That's, I think, the most simple. And social media, same, Samavira Meditation. You can find us everywhere like that.
So also on places like Instagram and Facebook and the like.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. Excellent. And to round out our conversation, I'd love to ask you this one last big question. And this is one that I've just decided to throw out there. What is your one big wish for humanity?
Oh, this reminds me of two. I love quotes. I love throwing out quotes. I'm going to do it again. The Dalai Lama said that if every 8-year-old in the world learns to meditate, we would have world peace within 1 generation. That would be, wow. I mean, not only absolutely amazing, but also we are so close. We can make it happen if we want. Yes. But of course, in these things like COVID have shown the division that we have instead. But it's really motivating. And there's this study that was done where people who learned to meditate, who were meditating, going through a meditation training in a certain area where there was a lot of violence normally. And it's not the people who actually conducted the violence who were meditating, it was the people in their neighborhood and their surroundings. And violence levels went down. This is an actual study. It's called the Maharishi effect. You can look it up online. Actual scientific studies that were done that have shown this. So for me, this is very motivating because it's such a powerful, it's simple, not easy, however, but it's such a powerful tool that has such widespread effects, even if you are not the one meditating, if people in your surrounding are, apparently, right? Yeah. So my wish for humanity is to deep dive more and more into this practice, into this modality, so that we can reap all the positive benefits that come along with it.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's such a powerful quote too, that, you know, if every 8-year-old learned to meditate, we'd be free of violence and all the things associated with it within 1 generation. What a way to be motivated. What a fantastic quote to motivate you to do what you do.
Yes, thank you so much. It's within our reach.
Yeah.
If we decide we want to go for it, we can, and we'll make it happen as humankind. I'm certain.
Fantastic. And is there any other lasting thoughts you'd like to leave with the audience before we round out?
I think we have covered it all. I think my mind is empty right now. No, I think we've said it all. This was amazing. Thank you so much. Honestly, it was a beautiful conversation, and I'm very grateful.
I've really appreciated having you on Voice on Fire. It's been a really good conversation, and I could talk about this topic for a very long time. Thank you so much, Lauren Schuivens, for joining me on Voice on Fire. It's been a total pleasure.
Thank you, Terry. All my best.
You're watching or listening to Voice on Fire Interviews with Intention. If you're new to Voice on Fire interviews, you'll hear from everyday amazing people on a mission to make a difference. These people are change agents, action takers, and difference makers, having a positive impact on their local community or across our global village. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell for updates on new interviews. I hope you enjoy.